Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive on group long-term care pricing. So I think the last time we had done a session that is similar to this was the first time our group quick quote tool was even released. So the most bare features we could have provided to you in the buddy system. And I think as we start to learn more about group products and we start to learn more about how they're priced and how we navigate the conversation based on the way that they're priced, and since we've added our census quote tool even in that time, there's been a lot that's changed. So I think it's a really good time to review anything and everything. It's obviously great to, know the ins and outs of the pricing, but being able to apply it to the group that you're speaking to is even more important. So we'll make sure as we're kind of going through our main observations that we're talking about, well, how does this affect the conversation I'm going to have or what I'm actually going to say when I'm meeting with a group? Because I do think that does matter and it matters in more situations than you think. But I mean, Mark is probably the king of this and something that I've kind of taken to heart is that people just want to know how much it costs at the end of the day, whether it's a group that's funding for their employees or it's an individual employee at time of enrollment wanting to know before I open this application, how freaking much is it going to cost me? Nobody's told me, right? So that's why the calculators exist from a client-facing standpoint, but from an agent-facing standpoint, there's a lot of value to that too. So just wanted to kind of set the stage. Mark, I picked this session not only because it's timely, but to summon you because I know this is one of your favorite things. Anything you want to start everybody off with?
Um, hmm. I think just diving into it is
All right,
probably the best way because it is a storytelling tool. So we'll get to some fun
sure.
cases that way.
Yeah, and we have really come a long way with the calculators, but we've come a long way with how we use them too. We've gotten to be better storytellers with our calculators, along with allowing these calculators to show you a lot more data. It's weird. We're kind of doing this like we created Benefit Buddy from the ground up, custom developed, and now we're circling around and doing it for the group side, and the group side calculators are starting to look as robust as Benefit Buddy, which is a pretty cool thing, but we can do it for group, and we don't see much out there like this. So it's been a really cool experience. But I think what I want to start with, Mark, first and foremost, is an approach that we've adopted lately where I don't think it is as valuable to start at something like 100,000 when you're showing this calculator for a face amount. I think it is the best approach to start with something small. Start with something very affordable and work up. Now, that's a common practice, but I think for our calculators, we have to think about what defaults we set. So we're generally setting it at a 10 or $25,000 amount. But depending on the group, you may, um, you know, change it up. But I think it's important because we're educating on webinars. We're talking to folks about even a $25,000 face amount can get you a couple of hours of valuable care every month, and it's cost effective to get started, right?
I think it depends on who you're talking to.
Sure.
It's a know your audience thing. Definitely, if you're talking to other agents or advisors or brokers, I would start higher.
Yeah.
If you're talking to employees that are executives, business owners, I would start higher. But yes, to your point, if you're starting with like the rank and file employee, a lot of times we'll default it to a lower amount because we want people to feel comfortable that they can get into this plan at an affordable rate. So I do think that's something you should think about when you're screen sharing this is who's on the other side of this and act accordingly. I don't think you need to start always with one amount.
So I don't have like a bullet by bullet agenda of things to talk about. I just know I have a ton of things that calculators and pricing teach me, and we'll kind of review that, and people will learn the conversations and
Mhm.
pitfalls or lack thereof
Yeah, but
as we go.
Yeah,
But
and as usual, just ask questions as we go because
yeah,
then we can kind of go to the topics that you guys find most valuable. But one thing I do want to mention, just because we take for granted we've used this calculator now for a long time, how to get access to it. Jason kind of teed this up right where we want to end up. But when you log in, it should default you to the group side and on the dashboard. You just
does.
have to scroll down to Quick Quote and click on that. That's you'll this will pop right up. So
Yep.
just in case you haven't seen it before, easy to get there.
Yeah. Um, and then another pricing item that I always find interesting is that there are steep inclines in pricing generally around the 60s. So I think that's also maybe not something you bring into your conversations unless you're working with a group that maybe skews older, but it is important to know. So if we have a 45-year-old and we change it to a 50-year-old, we gain about 16 bucks in premium here. When we go from 50 to a 55-year-old, we gain about 25 bucks of monthly premium for the same benefit amount. And then when we get to 60, we're gaining about, oh, what's that quick mental math? Like $36 on a monthly basis. So as you start to get up there in age, we go to, even from 60 to 61, we gain $10. That's pretty significant for a 1 year change, right? All the way up to 65, where yet again, we start to see pricing get very steep the older you are. But we also see, super affordable pricing at younger ages. And I think this is something that groups can tend to take for granted. If you employ, folks who are 18 to 35 years old, you're going to get a tremendous deal on the premium, right? $26 a month for 25,000 for a 35-year-old. If we look at a 30-year-old, $19 a month to get your foot in the door of long-term care planning, $15 a month for a 25-year-old, and then for fun, if we go all the way down to the, you know, age floor, we're looking at $13 a month to get you started. And this is where you could potentially, if you have a good planner on your hands at younger ages, go up to those higher benefit levels and see some really affordable premiums, which is especially powerful in California and Utah with all states 5% inflation. Um, just humor me and take a look at what the calculator outputs. And we have had these scenarios before where we had a 19-year-old purchase $10,000 of death benefit in an enrollment that we were doing. Their employer basically begged them to purchase something. And what we end up with is a $6 a month premium that's going to end you out at age 70. We're not even talking farther out claim age 85. Look at how that turns out for somebody who is 19 years old purchasing the minimum benefit that we have here. Just an unbelievably powerful financial tool to have access to at this age, especially given that unless it's a Thrivent, right? We don't have access to something like this on the individual market and certainly not at this premium. So I know we're often looking at, say, the average age of employees we enroll, but I think it's important to kind of know toward the extremes of those ranges and where there's immense value.
Yeah, I would add something here too. Is most of the time when we're looking at these plans, we're doing it from an employer-funded perspective.
Yes.
We're really trying to get the average premium down so the employer is willing to pay for a group of employees or maybe all the employees.
Yep.
We're getting a lot of requests right now, as I'm sure many of you may be aware of, from Unum groups, because Unum sent an announcement to all other groups that they're no longer taking new employees starting in February. And we're competing against old traditional policies that may not even have had a rate increase yet. I say yet because we know it will have a rate increase at some point. But, if we can start off at a lower average monthly premium, it means that they can move over to this all-state plan, for example, and still have something in the same price range of what they were paying before.
Yeah, and that's one of my imaginary bullet points that I would have put down if I wrote down bullet points. But what we're seeing there is we're seeing that knowing that existing employees can take those Unum plans and port them. We're seeing a lot of interest. If you can keep this in the ballpark of premium with what I'm currently funding with my Unum plan, I don't have to care as much about matching it up on benefit, or they generally would prefer to match it up to premium versus benefits, right? And switching to plans like these that have either mostly or fully guaranteed premiums, that will help shield you and give you more predictability out into the future as opposed to keeping your funding with Unum where you could potentially have your premiums go on a Stairmaster, right? So I think that's been important as we've had these discussions is a lot of the times for cases like this, it's about getting access for the new employees. But if you can shield them from potential rate increases and keep things in the ballpark from a pricing perspective, it may make sense for them to move their funding and have existing employees port their coverage.
Yeah. Me also switch it over just because I had a similar type of situation, but go to like a 50-year-old,
Hmm.
you know, and this is kind of where
Same
you might,
plan.
yeah, so same plan, just change the death benefit to 250. So this is the opposite end. You're talking to a business owner. Is that really $82,000 a month of long-term care? You can see what a wide range, right, of potential options you have here. But you can get, this being California and Utah with the 5%, you can get more like individual level coverage for business owners and key executives on these plans too. Different situations obviously have different levels, but this is kind of another shock and awe wow factor that you'll run into just with your individual clients, right? And this is where we'll talk about comparing it to individual plans, but it's not anymore where group is just for this type of client, individuals for this client. We're seeing a lot of crossover. Group plans for individuals and executives are definitely viable now. Individual plans for worksite too. We're seeing a lot of carriers going into that market with their individual products. So you can't necessarily silo it out. You have to really compare across different markets to find the best solution.
Agreed, and that's a super good segue to just popping out the extra chart. If you haven't been in here in a while, we have the ability to compare these plans. But what I want to do is, if I can, just start with, um, let's do a different state. We're always showing California. We don't want to be complete homers. Let's do Nebraska. Karen, you got me thinking about Nebraska. And let's just change this to say a Chubb LPT, and let's go to maybe we get 100,000 um of death benefit GI for this group, for example. This is what helps us set up individual sales, individual lead gen right here. We spend time, of course, educating about the value of this plan. We're not going to go in there and torpedo a group plan. We know what the value is on the group side. Guaranteed issue underwriting, so easy access and affordability, right? This is still a heck of a lot of benefit to be able to get for $171 a month. It's going to provide super meaningful care to you if you need it for long-term care. But when you stack it up against the cost of care at age 85, right, we realize we're going to need some other help. And we also educate on there are lots of different angles to a long-term care plan, right? There is such a thing as family caregiver, family assistance. There is such a thing as self-funding, and most people are self-funding part of their cost of long-term care. But we also talk about how this plan contributes, and we're still going to need help here in many cases, if we want to cover more of this gap, right? So it gets them thinking about self-funding. It gets them thinking about the leverage of the plan, but it also gets them thinking, oh, maybe there's a market where I can either purchase more through this plan or purchase more coverage elsewhere. And that's where we'll educate on the fact that we have individual products with compound inflation protection that the Chubb plan isn't going to offer. though they are medically underwritten, we need to start with something that's guaranteed issue first, right? Get our foot in the door, but then we can work on individual planning. We can work on simplified issue underwriting amounts, and that gets people to understand, wow, this is what I'm up against. It's not the cost today necessarily. It could be, chances are low, but it's about the cost of care 35 years from now, or if I'm, say, 40 years old, 45 years from now, right? So that really helps us to set up that crossover at the end of the day. It's all about kind of comparing to what they're up against. We don't want to scare people, but it would be foolish to give them the opportunity to protect themselves against something and not show what we're protecting against, right?
Yeah. Jason, Jackie brought up a really good point and asked a question here. Would you want to also try to stack, depending on the age of the client and the monthly cost of care in the future, with keeping their unit plan and adding another group plan, for example? I think that's a really important point here,
Yes.
and I don't know if you want to address that.
No, I think absolutely. And a lot of the times when we're talking to these groups, we are using vocabulary like supplement instead of replace, add instead of replace. In many cases, the folks who have those existing Unum plans have plans that are 15 years old. And anybody who's ever looked at a 15-year-old, 20-year-old long-term care plan knows even if you're not getting an unbelievable 5% compound lifetime unlimited coverage, you are getting something that is priced with assumptions from 15 to 20 years ago, maybe bake in a small rate increase. You have tremendous value in what you have there. This is an opportunity to add more guaranteed without underwriting to that because we're looking at the cost of care, right? So we need all the help we can generally get. And if you have two bites at the apple to get something guaranteed at really affordable pricing, you generally want to take it. We don't want to replace something in, that's already out there, um, that we
Yeah.
already have.
Yeah, we talk about some of these concepts on the individual side, especially now with like short-term care and filling deductibles and supplementing health insurance is a big topic with employee benefits. That's why these voluntary benefits are popular in general. This is the same idea, is you're essentially able to build a plan over time. So people don't have to wait and say, okay, is this the plan that I want to buy? Well, I'm not sure. I'll wait 10 years to do this. Just start off buying something quick, easy, good value. You can add more over time, kind of like that guaranteed purchase option, that some carriers have today, but mostly have happened in the past. Because the policies are independent of each other, you can claim on multiple policies. You just have to meet the contract definition for each one. Reimbursement goes well with indemnity, in fact, right? You can kind of have flexibility in how you claim on the policies. If one carrier is dragging their feet on your claims, you're going to have another carrier that maybe is paying you out. There's diversification there. So, from my perspective, as long as it's easy to obtain and then easy to manage, it's a great value to have people think about constructing their plan over time. You got time diversification there too. I think there are probably some people in this room that have more than one long-term care insurance policy. I'm one of them now. It's just a matter of when do you find that great deal? Grab that deal when you have it, but it doesn't mean it's the be all end all, you know.
And that helps. You get more face time with employees if you are actually the one consulting with the employees, or if you're using long-term care specialist consultants as part of the enrollment. That's what's going to get a lot of face time with employees. Because Mark and I were on a webinar yesterday. I think we had maybe 140, 150 people on and about 80 total questions. And the one that gets asked very often that you cannot just answer in a moment. This question smacks me in the face every time I get it. How much do I need? This is great. How much do I need? Right? So that's going to require that extra layer of consultation. And that's somebody who is probably going to take a look at what they have, say, this is great, right? I'm going to have something, but I probably need more when they look at the cost of care, right? It's not about do I need this, it's how much do I need. right? So that's kind of your really engaged employee who may be one of those crossover candidates.
Yeah, and it really helps the story because for me, boiling down that story to employees and consumers is really the secret sauce, right? The key to making this, to helping them move forward. And what I'll usually do is I'll say, you know, buy something that you plan to keep because you win as long as you own the policy and you
Yep.
don't drop the policy. Remember, these policies are priced so well because they assume most people are going to drop them. And it helps explain the value of the policy, but then it also explains what to do and how to make a decision, which is if you're comfortable paying $96 a month and you're going to keep that policy, you're making the right decision. If you
Yeah.
want to get more coverage and you're comfortable paying $200 a month, you know, up the death benefit and do that instead. And like we always talk about, Jason, right, is you're not buying insurance or self-funding, you're always doing both. How much self-funding do you want to do? And if you're getting a good deal, good insurance multiplier, right? That's how we measure the value, buy more. So those are the kind of tips, advice we're giving people even on these webinars is make that decision based on how you feel about the value of it, but buy something as a foundation because it's going to do you a lot of good later on, or maybe even just get you preferred providers later on because they like to find clients that own long-term care insurance too, and you're going to get the better quality providers and care even if you're self-funding.
I can't tell you how many times yesterday on the webinar, Mark, that I replied to a question with buy what you can afford to keep. That is like one of the most important points to make sure that you cover when you're educating employees. Because even if we're dealing with a universal life or a whole life solution, it's not going to be the accumulation or cash value amount that they're used to, right? This is not like individual hybrid long-term care plans where you can pull back, a significant chunk of the premiums that you paid. A lot of these are designed to run cash values very low or near zero, right? Or don't have cash value in them. So there's not a lot of what am I looking for? Consolation for surrendering the plan. So you want to buy something you just plan to keep and plan to use because as Mark said, that's where the value is, either through needing some form of long-term care and realizing that benefit or passing away and leaving something behind to your beneficiaries. But yeah, the question was all the time, what happens, what would happen if I, can't afford to keep this? What would happen if I need or want to drop this? That gets asked a lot. People just want to know. It's not saying that that's where their behavior is gearing, but they want to know.
Just going to another module, Jason.
Yeah.
Um, Change the claim age back to 70, and we can kind of look at a few different options here, but let's start with 70. And again, because this particular product doesn't have inflation, right? It's going to have more benefits if you claim earlier. It's going to be more for that, here and now. Go to self-funding though. So I think it's important. Okay, maybe that reset. I think it's important to look at kind of the side by side, right? When we're looking at buying insurance, self-funding, when you pay over time, that monthly pay or that annual pay premium, your dollars actually don't add up because a lot of your dollars are getting invested in the future. And so some people might have a perspective, oh, I can just self-fund and I can get a better value. But I think this really puts into light. Again, you have to kind of think about conservative, right, investments, not like 10%, stock market investments. But I think this is important just to do this calculus for them because a lot of people are just thinking about, is that a good deal? 5.8 times compared to what? And I think this comparison is powerful, but it also is important to say that these two things complement each other, like we talked about earlier. If you're not getting enough from the insurance, you're going to be self-funding. The 90-day deductible, you may be self-funding. There are ways to fill those gaps, like with individual coverage, like Jason was saying, but you can kind of do these comparisons.
Yeah, when we set the claim age to 85, you can see the longer that you live, the more value that you're actually going. The self-funding is going to build up over time
Mhm.
And the other direction of way that they complement each other is if you claim at age 45, if something happens and you need care very early on in life, you're going to have a lot of leverage out of the insurance plan, and your self-funding account is not built up enough yet. It hasn't had enough time to compound, right? Even if you say 15 years down the line something happens, even if you say at your retirement age something happens, of course it's going to favor the compounding asset the longer out you take this, but that's why they kind of complement each other to make sure at various different timings, because we can never predict when we need care, you're going to be covered in some way, shape, or form, whether it's better on one side or better on the other side that you use those funds.
It's a quick question. Did we change this so we don't have the life insurance on the extra restoration anymore? We used to have that.
Um, that's a good question. There may be something
Okay,
that
I'll
we're
do some research, but I just wanted to see if you knew.
that may be something that we're working on in here, but I think a lot of the times for the consumer facing calculators, we put things in terms of total insurance benefit, and I can't now that you've said something, it feels like it's missing, but I can't
Okay,
remember if we've just put it in terms
okay.
of LTC benefit. But yeah, I mean, you would be seeing if we were to put this in terms of total LTC benefit, you would see an extra 50,000 here. You'd see 250.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of next, future steps in this, obviously, if you select the product drop down, Jason, you have not that one, but the one on the left, the product one.
Oh yes, sorry.
You have a lot of different plans available to you. So just to give you an idea of the roadmap, and please type in, requests that you have about what you want to see in here. We've selected the top four carriers that have the extension of benefits for long-term care, so more of that linked benefit concept, and the restoration of the death benefit. I think those are really important. Someone sent me like a Mass Mutual quote. Nothing against Mass Mutual's product, but the quote they sent me had 80% for long-term care. And they're like, hey, we already have, this plan through a PEO. Should we do this plan, as a standalone offer? And so I said, well, it's 80% for long-term care. If you do it with one of these four carriers, you're getting 200% for long-term care. You're getting 2.5 times more long-term care duration, right? More long-term care coverage. So I think it's important, like that context, as to why you're choosing these products, right? It's LTC first. The life insurance creates the stability and the guarantees. I use that, Jason's got his own language around how to describe it, but it's really important in the group side to talk about that because the most common question that I get from the employer side is, why am I replacing my current life insurance? And
Yep.
it's not about, we're not trying to replace your current life insurance. We're trying to give you long-term care that you don't have right now. And this life insurance is just extra added on top of the life insurance you already have.
I talk
I think
about it
it's
as a
important.
mechanism, right? So
Yeah.
it's your ticket into the long-term care benefit, and it's a hedge against never using it. So it's a value protector, but it's also the way that the long-term care benefits are initially delivered, right? If you can figure out your own way to keep it simple, as long as you can keep it simple so it's understandable, people will say, "Oh, it's not actually about the life insurance." So I have extra life insurance, but this is really about the long-term care, right? So I shouldn't worry about stepping on the toes of my other life plan because this is more of a long-term care plan. Just has bonus life insurance, right?
Yeah. I'm also scroll down real quick. I want to get back to, I'm sorry, I got off track a little bit. But below the chart, you have an interactive chart here that also kind of breaks down the duration of coverage and the acceleration percentage and the restoration when it's available. I'll have to find out where that piece went. But the real key to this is that, if you're confused about how a particular plan works, you get a lot of questions about what's the duration of the coverage. I would just scroll down and that's going to tell you, is it a 25 month with a 25-month extension, which is a 4% acceleration? Is it 17 and 17, which is 6% acceleration? We're finding that the carriers are coming out with more and more of those options. Trustmark pretty recently added a 6% so that now you have 4 and 6%. I think Chubb is doing the same thing. So each of them are kind of competing, for your market share, and they're kind of responding to what the market's asking them for. Allstate kind of has an advantage, with the 6%, but the other carriers are coming out with those options too. Um, but going back to the products, right, in terms of the roadmap, we'll probably be adding pretty soon the Unum option. So like you get a lot of requests for Unum. So just to be able to kind of plug into the calculator so you can compare what the old Unum pricing looks like compared to the new group products. I think that those requests are going to be keep coming even past next February. We're going to keep hearing about groups that want to explore new options. Um, we'll probably be adding Transamerica's chronic care rider. Um, Allstate has a 5% rider that increases the monthly benefit, but not the total benefit. But we're finding a lot of people are interested because they can get their money out sooner, right? With that 5% growth. So it kind of creates a shorter benefit period, but a much higher monthly benefit. Um, there's about 3 or 4 carriers with extension riders that have recently entered the market as well. So if you have a particular favorite carrier or a new carrier that you're looking to add, just let us know. We don't want to just do all of them at once. We're going to kind of prioritize them based on where there's demand for it. Um, Jason, anything else top of mind?
Yeah, so Transamerica does function differently and essentially works on an older product generation in 3 different states called TransElite, which also has their chronic care rider um, for New York, Vermont, and Virginia. So we'll have that in there shortly. New York will actually probably be first of those, believe it or not. Normally, New York is the last of anything, but New York will likely be the first one. And then where Vermont and Virginia pricing differ, that will be added as well. But what we want to avoid is having you we just talked about potentially 4 to 8 new plan designs we're going to add here. Um, what we are eventually working on, I unfortunately don't have a timetable for it yet, but we are going to work through having a little state drop down in here and having a group size segment drop down in here so that plan designs will filter based on the state the group is in and the size segment so that you can compare um, really all that you actually have available and nothing that you don't based on your group's specs. So, for example, if we're in any state but California and Utah, it will not show this plan design. If we're looking at a group under 2,000 lives, it won't show EOB2 for Chubb. You can also leave it empty if you'd like to compare the whole market, but we want you to be able to filter out some of the noise and work with the plan designs you're realistically going to be working with. So that's a big change that we're planning. And then, Mark, I mean, this is our test page. Coming soon, you're going to be able to compare group product to group product, which is going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of bugs to squash with the side-by-side comparison that we're working through pretty well right now. But you will be able to compare, uh, a Chubb to an Allstate. It's, you see the aforementioned bugs, right? But we have these charts in. We're constantly kind of making changes to the internal pricing and mechanics. So that's probably why we're getting our friend NAN in here. Um, but for example, if we're comparing ULE to Allstate at 50,000 death benefit, you can compare the value, you can compare the premium, you can compare the difference in the monthly benefit amount that you end up with, and you can compare the total amount of insurance you end up with based on what you've selected. Um, I think it will generally end up being like to like premiums to start, but we may launch this with, say, if I want to compare Allstate at 75 to Trustmark at 50, or maybe the reverse of that, Trustmark at 75, Allstate at 50, so we can show equal monthly benefits. So we're comparing on a level playing field, comparing the values that way, comparing the pricing that way. That is really our next objective with this tool. So I'm sure there are a lot of insights that are going to be able to come from this, but you also have your good pal census quote to help you do that on kind of an aggregate level as well for any employer funded cases you have. And that's been a huge piece to us. And we're working on adding some buttons to the census quote tool, just a couple of spots under quick quote in the buddy system. So what we are trying to work with here is have a button that essentially turns a lot of the data you have into a presentation friendly format. If you're working with your own Excel templates, you can still feel free to do that, but we wanted to make that just a little bit more accessible to you all to have something a little bit more handsome to be able to present there. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things coming to Quick Quote. This has been kind of our big focus of the three tools, but we've made a couple other changes too, just to kind of give you the whole state of the union here. Product Buddy now has six carrier choices. So if you are in one of those scenarios where all six products are available to you, between the term life options for Allstate and Trustmark, which have been newly added, um, all six will show at the same time, and you can cycle between all of them with all of their own very pretty one pagers, all of the case highlights. That's all available to you now. In the future of Product Buddy, what we're hoping to do is, depending on the results you have for carriers, maybe having another tab or a little button to essentially flip this card over to the back and compare using even more things than just the case highlights. We'll probably start with being able to compare the case highlights. So think of a spreadsheet. Is long-term care rider available? Check for each of the carriers that does. Is extension of benefits available? Check for each of the carriers that does. Restoration of death benefit available? Check for the carriers that do, and kind of compare it like you're comparing cell phones, computers, whatever else you're kind of used to seeing comparison charts for. So that'll make things at a glance much easier beyond just generating the one pagers for your use. So we got a heck of a lot. Um, but we are always all ears for feedback. A lot of what we've kind of gone through as far as iterating the tools as they are today is from feedback from you all. So feel free to speak up if there's anything you'd like to see or you'd like this to be able to do. I feel like we're moving in a pretty common sense direction to give more information to you all and filter out information not pertinent to you, but we're all ears.
Yeah, Jason, I want to also highlight some of the resources which are related to the sales tools. So,
Hmm.
under the marketing section, we've kind of pinned right to the top now the proposal summaries. So they're Canva templates, which essentially means that you can click on them, create a free Canva account, and edit them. You could delete our logo, put your logo on it, whatever, however you want to use these templates. And what these are, as we've talked about, these are kind of the one-pager summaries of the proposals that you get from the carriers. So it's just a whole lot of options for you to kind of pull off the shelf, make edits to, and that's the best way. You don't want to necessarily just send a full 30-page proposal to your client. They won't understand it. We barely understand it. So summarize that, get them something that they can kind of sign off on, make it quick and easy. These templates have been
Yeah,
really,
and
really powerful.
if you don't like buddy colors, I don't know how you couldn't. Blue and orange are actually my two favorite colors before I even started working here. But if your company has a different color scheme, you can edit all of the colors. I was talking to one of our partners the other day who's just started working with us, very diligent. They were like, I went in and I changed this to be the colors of my company's brand scheme. And I was impressed with that. We want you to make it your own, right? If you want to cross out Buddy recommends and say Karen recommends, if you want to say Art Jetter and Company recommends, right? Make these things your own. We're happy to advise you on how to go about doing that, but it's pretty simple. You hit a couple buttons, you start with Canva. You can even change the color of the pie chart. I want the pie chart not to be blue and orange anymore. I want it to be red and green because Christmas is right around the corner, baby. You can do whatever you want in Canva. Super easy. I love Canva. So that
Yeah.
was my soapbox.
So every time, we're talking to our BGA friends, we really want you guys to be running your quotes, running your proposals. This is just a self-service way. Hopefully it adds to what you're already doing. The products under the resources as well, I think that's really key to mention. Again, you'll see at the top the four top carriers. So this is kind of how it's linked to the tools. But the next question is going to be, what is the underwriting for a simplified issue? We're going to get a specimen contract, right? So everything that you used to have under the group solution sales guide is now in this new, uh, beautiful product section. Jason, feel free to
We can,
add to anything I'm saying here.
yeah, you can cycle through each of the carriers. And for each of the carriers, we have their own rate calculator. We have product information spelled out for you as if it were like a brochure that each of these group carriers should have, but do not. Product sweet spots, of course, you're never going to see a Buddy INS product page without product sweet spots. Contracting information if we have it. Each has their own siloed out calculator, which is super helpful. If I'm just wanting to learn about Chubb, I can still get all their plan designs here and take a look at them and understand the difference in the plan designs without the noise of every other plan design in here. A map with state approvals, so again, Product Buddy will kind of tell you that first and foremost, but again, while you're here, you can kind of get an idea. Proposals and contracts, underwriting questions, a lot of the FAQs we have. I think these pages are new. We haven't spent much time, um, making you all aware of them. So a lot of the FAQs we get can likely be answered right in here, and we're only going to continue adding more to these pages. So I recommend it, especially if, for example, you're working out of state and, you know, Transamerica was never very good for me in Florida because they didn't have extension or restoration. But now I have another state that I'm working in, and all of a sudden, Product Buddy's recommending them. Now it's time for me to do my homework, right? So, um, yeah, we'll continue adding more and more to these over time, but this should be a great leg up for you to help you get started, no matter what you need. And we've got at least one study group in there for each of the carriers. So, um, feel free. We know you are all nerds just like us, so definitely take a look at these. Beyond that, we're still building out our group sales process page a bit, still a little under construction at this moment, but we've kind of broken things down into some easy to digest steps, right? You know, it's yes, the process can be complex, but it can also be very, very simple. I'll explain how the process works to people and they'll be like, "But yeah, Jason, how does the process actually work?" This is how it works. There's generally five overall steps. You may see more information crammed into one step than another, but identifying your group opportunities, the pre-sale where we give you an idea. Again, we try to promote the tools on the study group so you can become a power user of them and really kind of cut out the middleman when it comes to getting a lot of the answers about products and pricing. So I've got guides that are in here for using every one of the tools all the way through census quote, how to fill out a quote request form, proposal process. You'll see more in a moment. I've got some pieces written out that I will add in there over the coming days here. Sold group process, you can get an idea of how to work with us on a commission split basis based on enrollment services that we use, sold case information that we generally need once you've actually sold a group, and we're going to continue to build out the enrollment process with landing page demos and things like that so you can kind of see up close and personal what does an enrollment kickoff look like, what does the process look like when you're in it. So it's been a little bit since we've gotten these pages up, and there's still more work to do on them. But hopefully, if you saw that for the first time, you go and check out some of those resources and learn a little bit more outside of what we can teach you 45 minutes a week. Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? Me personally, I laughed, I cried. It was a wonderful session.
Buddy Portal's come a long way, baby.
It really has. It's pretty unbelievable. Every once in a while, I'll see an old screenshot from like the very, very beginning, and it feels like I'm looking at like a kindergarten picture of us. And more to come. If that's it, I think we're good to wrap, as long as there's nothing else you wanted to cover, Mark.
Yeah, I think it's great. Um, and like I said, because it's now going down to small group sizes, we're just running into so many opportunities. So if you're in this group and you're like, I don't work with groups, do you work with business owners? I think you have some clients there. So definitely take a look at it. Especially with that 5% rider, which to me is like urgency. Like this might be first generation pricing. Take advantage of it. Your rates are guaranteed, but you never know when carriers are going to change their products and change their rates, right? That is going to happen more frequently. So I get your client the coverage now, have that urgency, and hopefully they will too. I
Yeah, I
think
Hey,
think
moving forward.
go ahead,
Mark
Wayne.
and Jason, do you know if the possibility of carriers doing a 10 pay?
Uh, Not on yet on the hybrid side with the group carriers. There's a lot of opportunities there, Wendy, like tax deductibility, separately identifiable premiums. 10 pays is another good one. You can prepay annually. I had one client say, "Can I prepay for the next 15 years? I'll write you a $3 million check today." I was like, "Let me ask the carrier. That sounds like something they should entertain." So if you get the question, I'd ask them because they may have the ability to kind of like artificially create that. But really, what we'll see is probably next year there's going to be a group traditional product in the market that will have a 10 pay. So I think you're going to see it, but maybe coming in from the individual side, but still, or not the individual side, the traditional side, but on a group chassis.
I get that question a lot, as we probably all do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just a matter of the carriers going after certain market segments.
Mhm.
And all the group carriers on the hybrid side started with, well, they're already in the benefit space. Let's start with our clients that have 2,000 plus employees,
Yeah.
make sure that we're adding long-term care to the other products we already offer so they don't go to our competitors, and get the long-term care. But now we're seeing them going down market, like we've talked about just in the last 1 to 2 years, right? We're seeing, now down to 3 lives, 5 lives. And I think you're going to see, because of that, employer funding, right? Which is what we always talk about with small groups. Well, what do you need with employer funding? These things, right? 10 pays. So I think it's going to happen, but I don't know which carrier yet is gonna take the leap. The new carriers, though, are going to do that.
That's a good discussion point too,
Mhm.
because with those carriers that have existed and are mainstays in the benefit space that have gotten
Mhm.
into long-term care or have maybe had it sitting around but are using it, or actually wielding it, right?
Mhm.
We're at a point in time of their industry experience where they're still young, right? So you can bring ideas, and this is not to say they'll implement it right away, but if you have real feedback based on client and employee conversations you're having, there's space for them to say, "Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe we should, you know, take that away and think about that," right? That's what makes this a unique opportunity too. Again, they're not going to grant every wish that you have, but
No,
if
and
we
it
can
is cool
it,
because you
it,
think of how many individual policies we all sold, right, with the 10 pay. I mean, it was just like silly, stupid how many people did that. And so you just kind of think, God, the group at some point will do that. I mean, it makes it just so easy, especially for a business owner who's like 50, 55, and he's going to retire in 10, 15 years. He wants it done.
and you can see it term life chassis, right?
Oh,
Like
totally.
clients had really, really good things to say and gravitated toward term life solutions. So guess what? Two carriers added a term life chassis to their already existing permanent products, right?
Yep.
So I think it's not too different from the hybrid space on the individual side, right? If a lot of things are very, very similar, there's going to be a rush to differentiate in some way, shape, or form that's going to make you favorable or copy what the other guy is doing so things continue to stay on a similar level. And you can probably anticipate pricing battles there too, right? So it's an interesting time to be in this space, and I think the pricing is just one small reason why.
Thanks, Jason.
Of course. Great one to end it on. Great question. Thank you all for being here. We hope you learned a new thing or two, or at least got a refresher. If you didn't learn anything new, we appreciate y'all being here. Be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one, everyone.